Hello everyone, Gabriel here. Today I'm going to show you my Shadow deck profile that I use on Ygopro. So to get started, there is one copy of Blackluster Soldier, and since this is a Shadow deck and a Lightsworn deck combined together, this is a very useful card because it has to be special summoned by using a light attributed monster and a dark attributed monster. So Lightsworn is obviously light and shadow, dark attributes, so having this card in a deck like this would be very useful to me. Next, I have three copies of Shadow Beast, which acts as my Pot of Greed spell card because I know the Pot of Greed spell is banned from the game, so I decided to put three copies of it because when I send it to the graveyard due to a card effect, I get to draw one card from my deck. So yeah, Shadow Beast, three copies, acts as my Pot of Greed, and I have two copies of Shadow Dragon. This is a very good card. It acts as my Mystical Space Typhoon card when I don't have a Mystical Space Typhoon. Because if I send a Shadow Dragon to the graveyard due to a card effect, I can destroy pretty much any spell or trap card on the field. So, very useful, two copies. Next is three copies of Shadow Screamata. This card is a very useful card in destroying a powerful monster that you can't destroy. You see, when it's flip summoned, you can target one face up monster that your opponent controls and destroy it. So, very useful when stuck in situations where there's a very powerful monster that you can't destroy. Just trick him into attacking Shadow Screamata while he's in face down defense position and destroy that monster. Next is my Lightsworn monsters. So I have Raiden as my tuner monster because he's a very high level for a tuner monster. Level 4. Very good for a tuner monster. And I have Layla Lightsworn Sorceress, which is also acting as my Mystical Space Typhoon, but as a Lightsworn monster. You know, if you switch it to defense position, you can destroy one spell or trap card in the field. And I have three copies of Mathematician, which allows me to send a card to the graveyard once I summon it, which is very good because Shadow Monsters effects work when I send them from my deck to the graveyard or from my hand to the graveyard due to a card effect. So Mathematician is really handy when you need to activate a Shadow Monsters effect. Three copies of it, and I have two copies of Shadow Hedgehog. If you're willing to make a Shadow deck, you must have Shadow Hedgehog in it because when it's flipped summon, you get to select any of your Shadow Fusion spells and you add them to your hand. And I have two copies of Shadow Falco. Again, if you're willing to make a Shadow deck, you must have Shadow Falco. It's really good for defense if you have no monsters but Shadow Falco, or if you have no monsters at all but you have Shadow Falco in your hand and it gets sent from your hand or deck to the graveyard by a card effect used by your opponent, you can special summon it to the field. So again, if you have no monsters, you can special summon this card. Really simple. Good for defense. For spells, I have Raigeki, which is a beast in my opinion. It destroys all the monsters your opponent controls. Of course, it's limited, it's OP. And I used to have Snatch Steal, but since it is banned, my second best choice is Mind Control, which grants you a control of an opponent's monster for one turn. It cannot be tributed or used to attack with, but it can be used as a synchro material or an Xyz material. Next, I have three copies of Shadow Fusion. Now, again, if you need a Shadow deck, you must of course have Shadow Fusion. It is the polymerization for the Shadow monsters. With it, you can fusion summon any Shadow monsters using of course its Shadow materials. And I have a copy of a Dark Hole, which is it destroys all monsters on the field, including your own. So it's useful when you don't have any monsters and you want to destroy an opponent's powerful monster, you can use it, it will destroy it. Charge of the Light Brigade. Since this is a Shadow and Lightsworn deck, you need this card because it sends the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard and it adds a light attributed monster, which is Lightsworn obviously, to your hand. And maybe this is good because if you like send the top three cards of your deck to the graveyard and one of the cards sent is a light attributed monsters and you already have a shadow monster in the graveyard, you can special summon Blackluster Soldier while in your hand. Or if you need to destroy a spell or trap card, you can add Layla to your hand by the effect of this card, and then you'll be able to summon Layla and destroy the card. Next, I have 3 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon, needed of course to destroy any spell or trap card in the field. 3 copies of El Shadow Fusion. El Shadow Fusion also, like Shadow Fusion, lets you summon any Shadow Fusion monster using its fusion materials. But what I like more about Shadow Fusion is if your opponent special summons a monster from his or her extra deck, you can use the monsters in your deck, graveyard, or field as the fusion material monsters. Shadow Fusion, it has to be a monster from your hand or your field, no matter what the case is. For traps, I have Bottomless Trap Hole, which is an amazing trap card. If the monster summoned is 15k attack or above, you can destroy this card summoned, and if you successfully do, you can banish this card. Next is 2 copies of my most favorite trap, Mirror Force. If I have this trap on the field set and my opponent attacks me with a monster and he has multiple monsters on the field, the attacking monsters and all the monsters on attack position on his side of the field are destroyed. Next is a limited 1 copy of Torrential Tribute. This is very useful when you want to wipe out the field of all monsters. When a monster is summoned, either in your side of the field or your opponent's, you destroy all the monsters on the field, including your own. Next is 2 copies of Breakthrough Skill. This is very useful when you want to destroy monsters that cannot be destroyed by card effects or cannot be destroyed by battle, because this negates all effects that are on a monster that you selected for the rest of the turn. So if you're up against a monster, for example the Beetle Dragon, which cannot be destroyed by battle or by card effects, this negates its effect. So for the remaining of this turn, you can destroy it by battle or by card effects. Really easy, and a useful card too. Compulsory Evacuation Device lets you select a card that your opponent controls, a monster card, and return it to his or her hand. Again, useful when you're fighting a monster that cannot be destroyed by battle or cannot be destroyed by card effects. You can just simply return that target to his or her hand or extra deck. Shadoll Core, 2 copies. This is a very good trap card for defense when you don't have any monsters and you wanna make yourself not exposed to direct attacks. You can activate these trap cards. It 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 acts as a monster for you with a defense of 19k 50 and an attack of 14k 50, and it is very good for defense when you don't have any monsters. The final trap is Solman Warning, a good trap. You sacrifice 2k life points, but you negate any summoning, any effect activation, any spell or trap card activation that your opponent just activated for the price of 2k life points. This is pretty much the main deck. For my extra deck, I have 3 copies of El Shadow Construct, my most favorite monster of all. He's the ace of the Shadow deck, of course, and it has a very sweet effect that if your opponent special summoned a monster and this special summoned monster battles Shadow Construct and he has higher attack points, so the special summoned monster has higher attack points than my Shadow Construct, he gets destroyed and the battle calculation is skipped. So my opponent just lost his monster even though it's stronger than mine. Next, 2 copies of Shadow Winda. This is the second best fusion monster in the Shadow deck. It cannot be destroyed by card effects, and it grants each player only one special summon per turn. Next is Leo, the Keeper of the Sacred Tree. This is the most powerful synchro monster I have. It's hard to synchro summon though because you need to have like a level 8 and a level 2 tuner or a level 4 tuner and a level 6 monster to summon it, because he's a level 10 synchro monster, but he cannot be targeted by your opponent's card effects except until the main phase 2, so you can attack while he has traps and you don't worry about your monster because it's not going to be affected by any effect cards. Next is Stardust Dragon. This card is my favorite from the show Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, so I decided to put it in the deck because I love this card, and it has this effect that if there is a spell or trap card effect that is going to destroy a card on the field, you can banish this card and negate that card effect. If you successfully do that, Stardust Dragon returns to your side of the field at the end of the turn. Now, the Lightsworn Arc monster, I don't really use it, but I liked the Lightsworn a lot. Before the Shadow, this was my favorite, Lightsworn, so I decided to keep it in the extra deck as backup to honor the Lightsworn deck. Moonlight Rose Dragon is a very handy synchro monster. When you special summon this card, you can target a special summoned monster that your opponent controls and destroy it. Another handy synchro monster is Arcanate Magician. This card looks pretty weak, but when you summon it, it gains 2 spell counters. When he has 2 spell counters, he gains 1k attack for each. You can once per turn remove 1 spell counter and target a monster on the field and destroy it. Of course, it becomes weaker, but you did destroy a monster, which counts. The second best out of all my synchro monsters is Armadius, Keeper of the Boundaries. This card cannot be targeted by any spell or trap cards while it's on the field, so no matter what phase you're on, this card is safe from any card's effects while it's on the field. And the rest of your monsters are because this card is on the field. So unless you destroy this card by battle, you can't activate any card's effects. For my Xyz monsters, I have number 61 Volcasaurus, which requires 2 level 5 monsters, a bit hard to acquire, but when you detached an overlay monster from this Xyz monster, you can inflict damage to your opponent directly equal to this detached monster's attack points. So, very sweet effect, worth it. The number 101 Silent Honor Arknight. This is a very beast card. When you're fighting a monster that cannot be destroyed by card effects or cannot be destroyed by battle, you can detach 2 overlaid monsters from this monster, but you gain the selected monster that you targeted as an overlaid monster. So really handy when you can't destroy a monster by battle or by card effects, you're simply using it as an overlaid monster. You didn't destroy it, you didn't use an effect, you just used the targeted monster as a overlaid monster. Next is Castle, the Sky Blaster Musketeer. This card can grant you the effect of taking a face up monster and returning it to the opponent's deck. So again, if you're fighting a monster that cannot be destroyed by card effects or battle, this is a very useful card. It requires 2 level 4 monsters to summon, which is a bit better because Volcasaurus requires 2 level 5, so this is a bit better to summon. My final one is Evil Swarm, which if your opponent has the number the number of the cards in his hand is a lot more than you have, or his field has cards than you do, you can detach 1 overlaid monster to destroy every card on the field, but you cannot attack your opponent this turn you use the effect in, but still you wipe the field, which is very useful for a card like this. So this is pretty much it, my Shadoll deck, my second deck ever made because I'm not that old playing the game, and it's been a very good deck to me so far. I enjoyed it. Leave a like if you like the video, subscribe if you really like the channel, comment if you think I should remove any cards from this deck or add some cards that you know about in this deck. As I said, I'm not that old in the game, I'm still a bit new. Thank you for watching, see you guys later.